I just want to say this video is like 45 minutes long, obviously. And it's about a book that no one cares about. Except for me. I was really conflicted about putting this video up because I didn't want people to be bored. But, like, this is my channel, Beach, and I'm gonna do what I want. And I spent a long time reading that book and talking about that book and then putting makeup on. So, you're gonna have to get it and deal with it this week. Alright, aggressive introduction over.
Just a quick audio note here before we start this amazing review, if I do say so myself. I just want to quickly throw this in before the start, saying that if you have any interest whatsoever in reading The Little Stranger by Sarah Waters, don't watch this video. I completely and utterly spoil every aspect of the book. Alright, so if you want to read it, go read it. I would definitely suggest it. It's a great piece of gothic horror fiction. It's very, very exciting and interesting. It pulls you in. It really does. So, you know, if you're really wanting a good book to read and you don't want to, you know, read something that is boring and you want to have a book that you can't put down, definitely pick this one up. But I'm going to spoil it a lot. Also, inside of this review, there are parts of the book, and this is spoilery too, so click off if you don't want to hear this part, but there are mentions of self-harm as well as death by one's own hand. So if you are sensitive to that or those subjects, please enter with caution and just know that those subjects will be talked about inside of this review. Just wanted to throw that in there really fast so that people weren't surprised when it shows up. Okay, let's go. Oh, and quickly just throwing this in as well. Sorry, this book has a lot of stuff in it, so there's a lot of things to warn people about. Also, inside this book, there is talk about mental institutions as well as non-consensual activities. So if you are very, you know, if you're sensitive to that, know that that is in here and that I will be discussing it. Okay, I think that is everything. Just overall, enter with caution. This book is not called gothic horror fiction for nothing.
My carpet's gonna smell like lime juice forever. Oh, shit. I spilt my drink all over my Harry Potter books. And I don't really care, actually. Huh, well that's a wet spot. So we had to move over a little bit because I spilled my drink all over my carpet, and it's gonna smell like limes for the rest of this carpet's existence. This carpet was put in the 70s, so it's got some history. And my hair has decided that it just doesn't want to... Fuck it. It doesn't matter. Now, do I think myself clever for the title of this video? Yes. Yes, I do. Alright, just let me have this. Okay? Okay. So I got the other side of my nose pierced. See it right there. Some other things have happened. I'm honestly I'm honestly thinking that I might go to bed in this just so that I can go to my therapist appointment tomorrow and we can talk about how the Wellbutrin isn't working. Anyways, today I wanted to do another book video, which is why we're all in front of these books. I look like Pugsley. This camera's crooked. So today I wanted to talk about a little book called The Little Stranger. This is a gothic horror book. I looked up what contemporary fiction was online, and it says post-World War II, and this is like post-World War II, like maybe like, I don't know, 6 months after it happens. So it's technically contemporary. Technically. USA Today says a classic gothic page-turner. Well, it was definitely a page-turner. It was written by Sarah Waters in, I think, 2009. The copy I have is from the library of Carolyn Calonini. Carolyn, thank you for this book. I got this book secondhand. This is an interesting book. I actually really liked this book. I was really sad when I finished it because I was like, well, fuck, what else am I gonna read? Like, I have Fingersmith, and I have The Paying Guests. So it's not like I'm out of Sarah Waters' books to read. And I already read Tipping the Velvet, which is really good, but also really frustrating. Just like this book, it's really good, but really frustrating. we'll get into it. This book starts out with this doctor, Dr. Faraday. I don't think there's a single moment in this book where you get to learn what his first name is. Everyone calls him Doctor or Faraday. Like, nobody says his first name. And I looked it up online trying to figure out, like, does he even have a first name? Have I forgotten this? Like, what is going on here? And I came up with a Michael Faraday, but there was like a birth and a death date that was also shown, so I don't think that his name's Michael in this book. So we're just gonna call him Faraday. It starts out with this dude, this doctor. Oh, how am I supposed to sit in this position? Oh, that works. This doctor named Faraday. And he goes, okay, so first, before I get too far into this, I have to say I finished this book about a week ago. I didn't take notes. It starts out with this dude. Oh, another thing I should probably mention is, like, I'm not all here right now. I might be a little floaty. Anyways, I've beaten around the bush too much. So this guy, Dr. Faraday, goes to Hundreds Hall when he's a child with his mother, who works at Hundreds Hall as a nursemaid. And it starts off with him getting a medal or something from Miss Ayres. I'll put it right here. I honestly just saw the A when I was reading and just kind of skipped over the rest of the consonants and vowels. Let's just call her Ayres. Miss Ayres. Mrs. Ayres. She gives a bunch of people medals. I don't know why. It's not important. So Dr. Faraday, his mother brings him into the kitchen, gives him soup after he's got his medal. He walks the halls. He finds a fresco with like acorns on it, and he takes out a pocket knife because all 8-year-old boys have pocket knives. And he cracks off one of the acorns and puts it in his pocket and then keeps it. That's how the book starts. Oh, I think I zoomed in a little bit. Oh, no, wrong way. There we go. Let's stay as far as we can from this face because it's a disaster. So he gets soup, and then it's like 30 years later. So he becomes a doctor. Oh yes, I remember why. There's a maid named Betty, she's about 14, who gets sick. The regular doctor for the Ayres family, I forgot why he doesn't go there, but he doesn't go there. So Dr. Faraday, which is like, I don't know, like same practice, same building, he goes instead of Dr. Graham. So Dr. Faraday goes out to Hundreds Hall, which is this Georgian house where he went as a child to get a medal for some reason, because who cares, and it doesn't matter. Really doesn't. And he goes because Betty is sick, but Betty's not really sick. She's pretending to be sick because she wants to be sent home. And he says, you know, why do you want to be sent home? Because, you know, your parents brought you here to be a maid so that you could eventually serve higher families because she's of a lower caste, yada, 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 Victorian England. So she's a maid and she's sick. So he comes and says, you know, buck up, why are you sad? And she says, because this house is evil. There's something weird in this house. I don't like it. I want to go home even though my home life kind of sucks. And he convinces her to pretend that she's sick the next day just so she can hang out in bed. But then after that, she's got to go back to work. And I don't remember why it is that he comes back to the house, but Dr. Faraday, he comes back to the house for some reason. Who cares? Who knows? It's just how this book works. So he comes back to the house and he meets like the rest of the family. He meets Roderick, the brother, Caroline, the sister, and then Mrs. Ayres. I think Mrs. Ayres has a name. Let's just call her Mrs. Ayres because I don't remember. He meets the family, and Roderick was in the war. He was in the Air Force, and he had a smash. They call it a smash. Basically, his aircraft crash landed, and his co-pilot died, and he got horrible scars on his face and burns, and his right or left, one of his knees, I think it is his right knee, got like banged up really bad, so it doesn't work very well. He's now the head of the house because the colonel, Mr. Ayres, has been dead for, it doesn't matter. So he's in charge of the house, and this house, this Georgian house, the Hundreds Hall, is just crumbling apart. It's just on its last legs, barely holding on, and just falling to bits. Like there's mold, there's rooms that they have to like cut off completely because they just can't keep them, and the ceilings are falling in, and there's water damage. It's a fucking disaster. Like borderline should be condemned. And this 3-person family is living there. And I don't, like I said, I don't know why he comes back to the house, but he comes back to the house. And the next big plot point is he decides that he's going to treat Roderick's leg with electroconvulsive therapy, which is like some brand new thing in this book. The electroconvulsive stuff, like it's still being like tested out, and they've had like other patients that have had used it, so, and they've turned out well, so he's like, oh, well, yeah. But the family has no money. So what he decides to do is he decides to turn Roderick into a study case, basically. And what that means is that he's going to treat Roderick for free as long as he can write about it inside of journal essays and stuff like that and publish it. And it's like his findings into how electroconvulsive therapy works with prolonged muscle illnesses, dystrophy, things like that. So that's why he keeps coming back to the house. Oh, I forgot to mention, this is really important. I'm clearly not here and should probably make this video another time, but we're making it now because I want to. And I put this on my face, and I honestly don't get ready anymore for anything because nothing matters. There's a dog named Gimp, or Gip, not Gimp, that might be a slur, sorry, Gip. So Gip, yes, there's a dog named Gip, he's a black Labrador, it doesn't matter what kind of dog he is, but just, he's an old dog, his name is Gip. And Caroline, the sister, loves this dog. This dog is her dog. And Caroline finally tells him, you know, hey, you know, there's these gates that cross our land. If I give you keys to the gate, it'll be a lot easier for you to go and visit your patients. So she gives him this gate key so that he can just kind of like drive over all the land that they have because they have all this land still. Yeah, so he uses the gate key to cross their land to get to patients faster. And because he's using their gates, keys and gates so often, he just kind of like, you know, stops by the house every once in a while. Just kind of sees what's going on. Every Sunday he goes to play with Roderick's leg, but otherwise, you know, he just kind of shows up, and Caroline and Mrs. Ayers have tea with him in the little parlor. Yes, the little parlor, that's very important. That's an important room. The little parlor, and Roderick is there sometimes, but usually not because he's usually out on the farm because they still have dairy cows, you know, milking cows and trying to hold on to stuff because everything's falling apart and there's so many bills and he's in charge of everything and he's falling apart because he's in charge of everything and everything is falling apart. Did I stress that enough? So he gets more and more stressed, and suddenly Caroline is noticing that there are like these burn marks in his room, around his room. Like there's burn marks on the desk, I think, and the wall and the ceiling. And then Roderick finally opens up to Faraday and says the mirror that was on his, what do they call it? I don't know, like washstand thing, you know, where they have like the water in the pitcher and then they have like the mirror. He tells Faraday that he experienced this mirror coming off the wall over the basin and crashing to the floor. And he also shows Faraday all of these random seeming burns on this furniture, on this wall, on the ceiling. It's a mystery to him how these things have happened. And we kind of forget about Betty for a little bit. It's fine, whatever. Oh, you know, I think I mixed up events. This is why it's called 5th grade book reports, because I have the brain of a 5th grader. At least the memory of one. Forgot to mention, so before they notice the burns and stuff and Roderick is slowly like mentally deteriorating, Mrs. Ayers decides that they're going to have a party. And they haven't had, this shirt is so big on me. It's like 3 sizes too big. I kind of look like a potato sack. It's really bothering me. If I change now, though, it's gonna be extra weird. So they decide that they're gonna have a party, kind of like the old days, you know, back when the hall wasn't a condemned building. And they invite all these people, and this one couple comes with their daughter, and they're, I think they're Americans that have fallen into new money versus the Ayers, which are old money. I think they're called the Baker, yes, I found a spot. The Baker Hydes. Not the name I would have chose, but I'm not an author. So the Baker Hydes bring their daughter, and they're having this party, and it's kind of awkward because people notice that the building is, Hundreds Hall, the building is kind of a shit show, and the heirs are trying so hard to pretend it's not a shit show, and they have all these wealthy people around, and the daughter gets bored, and so she decides to go to the window in the little parlor. No, in the saloon. So she goes to the window where Gip, the dog, and she's like playing with this old dog. And this dog is old. He's like 14 years old, and he's really sweet, and he's really kind, and he's never bitten anything, and he's just always been a gentle sweetheart. Something happens. Some sound happens. Some mysterious sound happens by the window, and Gip bites this little girl. So this dog bites this little girl in the face, and it's really, really bad to the point where she needs stitches. And luckily, Faraday was at the party, and he stitches up her face, and she's gonna have scars forever, and the Baker Hydes are pissed! And so they want Gip, the dog, destroyed, or else they're gonna take legal action. And now that the dog is bitten, the dog must be destroyed. So it turns out that Faraday is the one that puts the dog down, puts him to sleep, and then they bury the dog, and the dog is gone. And with Gip's passing, Caroline also changes. It's very slight and it's very subtle, and you don't notice it at first, but her dialogue changes, and the author, Sarah Waters, has this wonderful way of describing how her face kind of changes. It's just interesting. It's so slight, you barely even notice it, but when you do notice it, it's almost heartbreaking because, you know, she loved this dog so much, and the dog had to be destroyed because of this unfortunate accident that has happened. So that happens before they find the burn marks in Roderick's room on his things, and before he sees the mirror coming off the water basin and crashing on the floor. So that happens before. So that is the first incident. That's kind of like, what is going on? And then the second incident are the burn marks. And Faraday believes that it's Roderick that is causing these burn marks by accident or whatever. Caroline's like, well, why is there a burn mark on the ceiling? And Faraday, you know, tries really, really hard to be like, oh, he must have gotten on a ladder to burn the ceiling. All right, Faraday, whatever. And Roderick starts talking about the house having an infection. Like, the house is infected, the family has this doom about them. And he starts talking about all these things, and Faraday's kind of like, are you all together in the brain area? And he's kind of like, Roderick doesn't even know if he's all there. Faraday's like, well, he's certainly not there. He's talking about outrageous things like burning the ceiling. Then one night, Roderick's bedroom, while he's sleeping, he's super drunk after the party where Gip clawed or bit the girl's face. He's super drunk, and he didn't actually go to the party. He stayed in his rooms, and he got super drunk, and he passed out on the bed, and he's out. And that night, while he was out, his room caught on fire, and the grate covering was over the fireplace, so the fire that was in there could not have come out. And as they're looking around the room, and as the firemen are looking around a room the next day, they're finding that these fires spontaneously started in random places, like on top of a chair, on the other side of the room, on this, that's under here, and that. Like, there's no way that any embers, flakes, or whatever, ashes, sparks could have ever traveled to the other side of this big room to cause a fire. So Faraday comes to the conclusion that Roderick himself set everything on fire, even though he was so drunk that he just fell on his face on his bed. Roderick really, he's gone. He's out of it. He has no idea that this is happening until his sister Caroline runs down the stairs and finds it and like pulls him out. So Faraday decides that Roderick is not all there and needs to be put in an institution for his own well-being as well as the well-being of others. So Roderick is removed from the house and taken away, and he's very upset about this because when he's gone, who's gonna protect his mother and his sister? He was the one that was keeping Hundreds together, Hundreds Hall. He was the one keeping the infection of the hall at bay. But now that Faraday's having him be removed, who's going to protect the mother and the sister? And he's pretty upset about it. So now it's just the mother and the sister. It's a lot. This book's a lot. And yet, at the same time, it takes place over like 8 months. This book is so fucking dense. Oh my gosh. So, all the responsibilities that Roderick was taking control of now pass on to Caroline. So all of this weight falls upon her. The author, Sarah Waters, is very clever with breaking Caroline down over time, like slowly having these things happen that just break her down. Like the saloon, the ceiling falls in and they have to close the saloon, and other rooms in the house are falling apart. The floors are falling in, the ceilings are falling in, the walls are warping, there's mold that's really dangerous to breathe in, and they have to slowly close off these rooms down to the point where it is just Betty the maid, her room, the kitchen downstairs, Mrs. Ayres' room, Caroline's room, and the little parlor. Those are the only rooms inside the house that are still livable. Everything else is pretty much just, don't want to go in, fam. Nope. And Caroline is just, there's all this land, and, you know, her brother is away at an institution, and her mother is trying as hard as she can to be as, you know, happy as she can or whatever. And Caroline and Faraday go out to visit Roderick, but over time, Roderick needs to stop seeing them because whenever he sees them, he gets very wound up about the house, and he gets really upset about it, and he talks about the infection again. He talks about how they're doomed there, how they have to leave Hundreds Hall because it's going to suffocate, and it's going to ultimately get them, the family. So they stop visiting Roderick, and Caroline is just in charge. So the next big kind of plot point, I'm really glossing over a lot of stuff just so that this video is not like a billion years long. The next thing that kind of happens is Faraday needs to go to this doctor's party where all of his colleagues and all of his peers are there with their wives, and they're dancing and they're drinking, and it's just like this party. I don't know why they have this party. It doesn't matter. To be honest, they just have this party. And Faraday decides to invite Caroline out because she's been so overworked that she needs something to just, you know, boost her spirits. So Caroline comes to this party, and people, you know, gossip because, you know, here's this single woman in her late 20s, the spinster, and here's this man in his 40s, a bachelor, and they're there together. And they dance and whatnot, and they drink, and then finally Faraday drives Caroline home. They pull over, they drive onto the property, but then they pull over to the side next to a pond, and they're just sitting there. And this is when Faraday, becomes the worst fucking character in this book. So when I was reading it, you know, I was already kind of upset with Faraday for sending Roderick away against his will. Like, that kind of was like, you know, a tick in my box of like, Faraday, I don't really like you that much. I really don't. And then this is when it really becomes clear to me that this guy really sucks. Girl, Caroline, run the fuck away as fast as possible. Oh my God. He pulls over to the side of the road, and she's drunk, and then he decides to take advantage of her.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer.
So, you know, he pulls in, and he tries to get under her dress, and he tries to kiss her, and it's... but she pushes him off, she pushes him back, she says, no, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this, I thought I want this, but I don't want this anymore, I thought I did, but I'm drunk and I just want to go home. And he's like, I'm gonna try harder, bitch. But he doesn't get very far because she kicks him in like the face. I mean, go girl. So he takes her home, she runs into the house, then it gets super fucking awkward because, so he travels back and forth across their lawn still because he has gate keys, but he doesn't stop at the house. He stops visiting the house because, yikes. Yikes. But then, I don't remember why he starts again, but he decides to visit the house again because I think it's because he's like, oh, it's been so long since I've come in. I need to come back because Mrs. Ayres is gonna get really curious as to why I'm not sitting in her parlor drinking tea as if I'm a normal person. And so he goes back. Oh, excuse me. I think I like almost threw up in my mouth. He starts advancing on Caroline more. He believes that, well, basically she's the one and that they're gonna get married. And so he tells her that they are going to get married. And then it's like alluded to that they kiss each other goodbye when he leaves, but kind of not really. It sounds more, the way that it's written, it makes it sound like Caroline is just kind of going along with it, not exactly like aware of what's going on. And this dude's just having the time of his fucking life being a dude. Being a bachelor in his 40s, and he's got, ooh, this wonderful woman in her 20s, and ooh, I'm a bachelor, and ooh, I want to kiss you, and ooh, guess what? We're gonna get married, beach. So Caroline agrees that they're going to get married, while at the same time, she's now having to sell off plots of the 100 Tall land. This book is so good, but I'm so tired. All right. So at this time, another interesting thing starts happening at the hall. Betty and Mrs. Beasley, who is the other housekeeper, she comes in during the day, she leaves at night, and then Betty is by herself at night. So Mrs. Beasley and Betty are cleaning up some of the condemned rooms, and they go to the saloon, and they're trying to clean up the floor where Gip the dog had bitten that little girl, you know, earlier in the book before shit hit the fan. They notice that there's little S's, like almost in pencil, like scribbled on the floor, just S's. S's, S's, S's. Can I find it? Can I find it? Can I find it? I'm gonna be so proud of myself. I'm proud of myself. I found it. Here. Finds these little childish writing S's on the floor. And they're trying to pick it up. They're trying to get rid of it. And they find out that the S's are actually underneath the varnish of the floor. So they can't remove them. So what they decide to do instead, Miss Eyre says, just put a carpet over it and we'll just lock the room. So they put a carpet over it, they lock the room. And so that's going on. Excuse me, just have to itch my nose piercings because they itch a lot. And this one hurts. It's my own fault. I don't regret it. Mrs. Eyre starts acting more and more removed. Away, you would say. Her conscience is kind of away. She's in her own reality. She's in her own world. And she doesn't realize that Faraday is going to marry Caroline because she's just so far removed. And Faraday starts having more conversations with Miss Ayres and is noticing that she's kind of getting farther and farther away from what's going on around her. And she starts talking more and more. I'm trying to find the other part that... 2 for 2. I found it. So she starts thinking more and more of her very first child because when she was a lot younger, back when Hundreds Hall was, you know, grand and not literally falling down around their ears and could kill them literally by falling apart, they had a daughter named Susan. And Miss Ayres is talking more and more about Susan. And Susan died due to diphtheria, which is the throat closes with tissue and then you suffocate to death. And it's really sad. Mrs. Ayres is becoming more and more kind of removed and talking more about Susan. And then she starts telling Faraday how Susan is always with her and has been with her since Roderick had to be taken away. And she always feels Susan wherever she goes. One day Mrs. Ayres decides, oh, I'm gonna take all these clothes out of this closet and just go through them and think about my life before it literally is a pile of shit, which it is now. And they find written on the ground in front of the cabinet, I think, or by the cabinet, I'm not sure, but they find this written down. I was really confused because I was like, sucky. Sucky? They have the word sucky written on their floor. Like what is that? And it turns out that Susan's nickname was Suki, spelled S-U-C-K-E-Y. So it was actually her name written on the floor. And Mrs. Ayres, you know, appropriately has a fucking meltdown, as anybody would do. And then the next thing that happens, you know, Dr. Faraday gives her a sedative because he's a doctor, and he's like, old lady, calm down. Calm down, calm down. There's an appropriate reason for this. It must have been done a long time ago. Calm down. You're a woman. You're having hysteria. Blah, 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 blah. I'm a man and I suck. And Caroline's just really trying to hold everything together. I mean, I'm really rooting for you, girl. Unfortunately, she's still going on along with his, yeah, I'm going to marry you sort of idea. So the next big thing that happens in the house is the nursery. There's a nursery incident. There's 3 floors to the house, I think. There might be only 2. I think there's 3 though. Let's just say there's 3 because I know that Caroline, Betty, and Mrs. Ayres' rooms are on one floor and the nursery's at a different floor and it's not on the ground floor because that's where the little parlor is and that's where Roderick's room used to be, the 3rd floor. We're gonna say the 3rd floor. There's the old nursery that has been blocked off, with all these other rooms that have been blocked off, have wood chips and wood like stuffed into the key frame, like the keyholes, so they can never be opened up again, because these rooms are dilapidated and falling apart and a danger to go in. And in the nursery, they have this speaking tube. Let me see if I can describe this. Up in the nursery, there's like, if you've ever seen a phonograph, there's like the phonograph type head, but it's like really small. It's like a really small thing. And in it is stuffed a whistle. And then the tube is made of metal and rubber, and it goes down into the kitchen, which is in the basement. And at that end, there's an identical like front with a whistle in it. And the idea is that someone in the nursery could blow into they take the whistle out, blow into the tube or talk into the tube, and then the whistle in the kitchen would go off, and then the nursemaids would take the whistle out and listen in the tube, hear what needs to be done, and then do it, and then vice versa. Mrs. Ayers gets this idea that she's gonna go up to the nursery because there's been problems with this tube. Betty and Mrs. Beasley? It's Beasley now because I can't find it. So Betty and Mrs. Beasley, this whistle keeps going off, and when they listen into the tube, they can hear struggled breathing, and they freak the fuck out, as anybody would do. So Mrs. Ayers decides to go up to the nursery and see what's going on. What's going on up there? Is there somebody being weird? What's going on? She takes out the whistle on the tube, and then she starts hearing breathing, like very struggled, like she describes it as like wet breathing. And she's like, oh my god, it's my daughter Susan. She's speaking to me through the tube. And Miss Ayers has a freak out and believes that she's in danger, and she's pounding on the window trying to get Faraday and Caroline's attention because they're in the garden below. And then the window shatters and Mrs. Ayers gets hurt, and they run upstairs, and she's crying and really upset because her daughter is speaking to her through the tube. So Mrs. Ayers is taken back to her room and put a sedative on her because, you know, old lady, go to bed. And they get rid of the nursery tube completely. They just get rid of it. Oh, I forgot to mention something that was also going on. They used to have in the house these bells that would ring. Like you pull a cord, and then in the basement, one of the bells would ring, and the bells were labeled like dining room, parlor room, so the library. You know, if you've ever seen like a period drama and they have servants, those bells start going off. Just randomly. They just keep going off, and it's to the point where they ring in the middle of the night, and Caroline just gets fed up, and she takes a pair of pliers and she just cuts all the cords so none of the bells could ring. And that happened before the speaking nursery tube thing happened. And so after the nursery thing, Mrs. Ayers kind of she gets very, very preoccupied. She gets very preoccupied with the idea that Susan is with her, and she's talking to Faraday about it, and Faraday's like, old lady, there's something wrong with your brain because I'm a doctor and I know everything. He's such a dick. I hate Dr. Faraday so much. He just doesn't listen to her, and she tries to tell him things, and he just doesn't listen. And Caroline tries to tell him things, he just doesn't listen, and he just takes advantage of her to Caroline like all the time, because Caroline does not consent to any of the things that he is doing. Faraday, stay far away from me. Yikes. Anyways, so Mrs. Ayers is talking to Faraday on one of these occasions that Caroline is busy because Caroline's in charge of the entire hall, all of the farming things. That's a lot of responsibility. So she's really busy. And thank God, because now she can find a way to be away from this man, because this man is just not a good match. And Miss Ayers tells him, my daughter Susan is definitely with me now, but sometimes she's not nice. Faraday's like, what do you mean by not nice? And she says, well, sometimes she bites me, she scratches me, she gives me bruises, she hurts me. And Faraday takes this as Mrs. Ayers is hurting herself, and that needs to be nicked in the butt right away. And to nick that in the butt, she needs to be taken away like Roderick was. And he convinces Caroline that her mother, Mrs. Ayers, is not in sound mind and cannot be left alone because she is hurting herself. But they don't have the money to send her to somewhere safe, and he convinces Caroline that this is happening. So Caroline's like, well, we can't do anything until the morning. Go home. I'll stay up with her. Nothing's gonna happen. Well, something happens, because otherwise this book would be really fucking boring. Caroline is watching her mother and then goes to her room, which is right across the hall, so that she can see her, and somehow falls asleep. And when she wakes up in the morning, her mother's room is closed. And she's banging on the door, and she doesn't get any answer. And she gets Betty, who's also sleeping up in that area, because Betty stays there all the time, to help her, and they can't get through the door. And they don't have the key. And Faraday arrives, ready to be Mr. Man, Mr. I know everything that's going on in this house, blah-de-da-de-da, I'm in charge now. Also tries to get through the door, it doesn't happen. He goes out to his car to get something, and he notices in the snow a key. It's the key to Mrs. Eyre's room. Why is it in the snow? I don't know. So they run upstairs, and they unlock the door, and they can't get the door open. And this is very sad, and I can't say it on YouTube because YouTube would get very angry, I believe. Even though YouTube don't know that I'm alive. Mrs. Ayres takes her own life, or her life is taken. Which one? But anyway, those questions are not asked at that moment. They're asked after the moment, and they are asked by Caroline, because Caroline is starting to think there's something wrong in this house. Roderick might have been onto something here. Mrs. Ayres is dead. She is dead. And they have the funeral, and it's very sad, because Mrs. Ayres throughout the entire book has just been this really kind, aging woman who is very Edwardian and very proper and kind of in the wrong era. She kind of doesn't progress after the war. She's kind of stuck in that time period before the war a little bit all the time. And it's really sad, and so they have the funeral. And here, my friends, is another reason why Faraday is a piece of shit. It's a piece of shit. And I hate him. I hate him. I hate him. Alright, so he decides, well, you know what? We're gonna get married anyway, and it's gonna be 2 weeks from now. Mark your calendar, baby. And Caroline, obviously, is like, the fuck? What? She and Betty, because Miss Beasley leaves after the nursing tube, the nursery tube type pipe incident happens. She leaves because she's like, nope. And good for her. Because I would have been nope as well. Ouch. I'm sitting on my feet, and I'm too old to do that. Ouch. So he's like, yeah, 2 weeks from now, we're gonna get married. Your mom just died, but we get married, beach. And Caroline's like, I don't care. I don't care anymore. Her brother is locked away. Her mother is recently dead, seemingly by her own hand. She's burdened with this huge house. They are bankrupt. What are they gonna do? And Faraday's like, well, we're gonna get married, and I'm gonna go and I'm gonna get you a wedding dress, and I'm gonna get you a ring, and I'm gonna do all these things without your permission and without your input, because you don't seem like you want to do them, and actually, in fact, you've told me no, you don't want to get married, but I'm gonna go ahead and do these things anyways, because I'm a fucking jerk. My name's Faraday, and I suck. So she actually tells him that the wedding is off. I don't want to do this wedding. Like I said before, in the car, way back when, at that party, this is wrong. I'm not into this. No. And he goes off and gets her a wedding dress anyway, and a ring, and he gets all the marriage stuff ready, and he just says, oh, she's saying no because she's under all this pressure, and her mother died, and all these things are just happening inside of her, and she's a woman, and she doesn't know her own feelings, and I can tell what her feelings are because I'm a doctor. Yeah. And so he does all these things, and then she's like, no, we're not gonna get married, no. And finally, he fucking gets it. Finally. And when I mean, like, third or second to last chapter, I mean third to second last chapter. He finally gets it through his big fucking skull. Caroline is not going to marry you. You are not going to move into Hundreds Hall like you want to. You are not gonna have a family with her. You are not desirable. The last part is my input. He finally gets it, and he leaves. He just leaves. And he learns that Caroline is selling off the last of the land. And he learns that Caroline is selling the house. Caroline is selling the house, and she's going to go to America or Canada, and she's going to be there, and she's going to stay there permanently. And she's selling off the rest of the stuff that's inside the house. She wants to get away from the house. I believe she actually says is evil at one point, and is just crawling with death. Obviously it's not crawling, but it's just, she just She uses the word infection like Roderick does. And Faraday, kind of goes, ugh, because Roderick used that word, and Roderick's an institution. And how could this woman that I'm going to marry, oh wait, no I'm not, use the same word? Something's not right. Something's not right. And he learns all this, but he doesn't go to her, doesn't talk to her. The date of the wedding that he planned, and he chose the date, arrives. He drives out to Hundreds Hall, turns onto that little parkway that Caroline and him parked at after that party by the pond, and falls asleep in his car. For 8 months, how many pages? 510 pages. This book has so much in it. It's almost overwhelming. Where was I? Oh yeah. So then he drives to the house the day after he falls asleep in their park. The date of the wedding that he had chosen, but then Caroline said no and they called it off. And he goes there, and I think it's like the 26th of May, and she was gonna leave on the 31st. And she arrives at the house. He arrives at the house. Faraday arrives at Hundreds Hall to find Betty completely just distraught. She is at her wit's end. She is just she's this 14-year-old kid, She's, rightfully overwhelmed at this point because of all of the shit that's been going on. So what has happened is during the night, Betty heard Caroline go up to the 3rd floor of the house during the night sometime, and then heard a sound. And what happens is Caroline has fallen to her death against the 1st floor marble. So Caroline is now dead. And there's an inquest, of course. And during the inquest, Betty says, Caroline said one word before this happened. She said, "You." And then something happened. Betty runs out of her room and sees Caroline almost as if she's got like wires or strings controlled to her appendages, falling over the railing to her death. And then Betty sees her death. Falls to her death by her own means. So Caroline is now departed, and Betty is gone, and the house is locked up because Caroline's already sold it all. And it's the end of the book, and Faraday still has a key, because they gave him a key, not only to the gates, but to the house when he first got engaged to Caroline. She gave him a key. I don't know why. He's a creepo, and he's nasty. Nasty! But he's got a key. So he drives out there after everyone's gone, and he walks into the house, and everything's gone off of the walls. The floors are bare. The rooms that were locked away are unlocked. They had to unlock them all when they sold it, everything. And he goes into Roderick's room, and he still looks at all of the charred stuff. And he goes up to Caroline's room and Mrs. Eyre's room. And I'm just gonna read because it's so interesting. The theory is convincing enough, and yet, sometimes I am troubled. I remember poor, good-tempered Gip. I recall those mysterious black smudges on the walls and ceiling of Roderick's room. I picture the 3 little drops of blood that I once saw springing to the surface of Mrs. Eyre's silk blouse, and I think of Caroline. I think of Caroline in the moments before she died, advancing across that moonlit lighting, and think of her crying out, "You." I've never attempted to remind Seeley, he's one of his colleagues, of his other otter theory that Hundreds was consumed by some dark germ, some ravenous shadow creature, some little stranger, spawned from the troubled unconscious of someone connected with the house itself. Forgot to mention, there's it's haunted or / somebody of the house is so tormented that part of their soul has made this demonic presence, this little stranger or something. Forgot to mention that. This is why it's called 5th grade book reports, because it was 6th grade, I get a D. Anyways, on my solitary visits, I find myself growing watchful. Every so often I'll sense a presence or catch a movement at the corner of my eye, and my heart will give a jolt of fear and expectation. This page will not turn, this is ruining the moment. Imagine that the secret is about to be revealed to me at last, that I will see what Caroline saw and recognize it as she did. If Hundreds Hall is haunted, however, its ghost doesn't show itself to me, for I'll turn, and I am disappointed, realizing that what I am looking at is only a cracked window pane, and that a face gazing distortedly from it, baffled and longing, is my own. Gotta ruin the end of the book for you. Sorry, the book ends with that. It's a really good book. I mean, I ruined everything for you, so you probably don't want to read it, but it's still really good and it's really well written. It leaves the reader wondering, was Hundreds Hall actually haunted? Was Hundreds Hall being haunted by the torment, the over-emotion of its occupants or occupant? Was it Roderick's troubled mind manifested? Did something manifest from that? Or maybe it was Faraday this whole time. Could it be possible that that part, that ravenous spirit, this separated part that was coming up from the unconscious depths of somebody at the hall, could it have been Faraday? Because none of this happened until Faraday came to see Betty. And from that day on, everything and everyone in the house, well, died. Roderick's still alive at the end, but he's moved from a private institution to just the county one. And because there's no money and there's no one to take care of him anymore. And so he gets put in a really terrible place. And it leaves... Sarah Water leaves the reader wondering who really was the little stranger in this book. Could it have been Susan? Could it have been a ghost? Could it have been the greedy and unbound unconscious of Dr. Faraday? Or maybe all the troubles and anxieties and histories and torments of Roderick? Maybe it was Mrs. Ayres and her inability to move on from the past before the war. It leaves you wondering, who is the little stranger? But yeah, who is? Who's the little stranger? I don't know. I guess it's up to interpretation. Anyway, I would agree with Newsday saying that it was completely absorbing. I honestly would stay up way too late reading this book. It would be like 1 or 2 in the morning and I'd still find myself reading. And I knew that I was going to be exhausted the next day, but I just couldn't help myself. I would say this is one of the better books that I've read in a very, very, very long time. And I put it right there with its sisters that I can't wait to read. And I guess I'm going to leave you with Dr. Faraday. Fuck you.